Yeah, very much so. And also, like economically, you're going to see a different distribution of wealth as a result of this. And so you've got a barrier to entry that, so there's a shifting barrier to entry, right? So there's an opportunity. And when you talk about sort of social justice and some of the potential of blockchain, you can actually see that there's an opportunity here to more evenly distribute wealth. But the barriers to entry are actually different. They're academic, they're science-based, they're technology-based, right? Which actually is kind of aligned to our current distribution of wealth, which is education-based.
Yeah, and also, I mean, economics fundamentally, right? I'm always reminded that, like, I spent a bit of time in remote Aboriginal communities in Arnhem Land, and everyone was on Centrelink, etc., etc., and then they stopped, or they massively cut back phone services for Centrelink, and you can only access it online, and something. People don't even live within phone reception range. They have a single public phone that they have to line up to use. And no one had access to internet. And people were just getting cut off. Every time there was a power cut, the whole town's cut off. No one had one anymore. So I think being really mindful of ableism, of structural racism, of ageism in the technologies we're using, and having to proactively bridge those gaps, recognizing that none of this stuff is uniform or neutral or one size fits all. And so if we're saying to the society, okay, we're going to start using this technology or this solution now, and saying, okay, well, this demographic is clearly going to have trouble with that, then we have to proactively invest, and invest big. But we also need to recognise that if a certain sector or a certain community is saying, this is the solution, it's great, it would work so well if everyone just jumped on board with it, but there are heaps and heaps and heaps of barriers for everyone jumping on board with it, maybe it's not a great solution. Maybe the solution is the one that people are able to easily jump on board with, because anyone can come up with any number of different solutions and processes and systems that will fix all our problems. But the barrier is, some people aren't able to use it. Well, that is a big barrier, and we can't make the mistake of saying this would be a great system if everyone knew how to use it. Oh, by the way, some people can't use it too bad. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. Yeah. Just on this one, but isn't it up to government to make sure that it's going to work?
Yeah, it should be, but we have
governance, of course.
Yeah, but we have a society now that is no longer led necessarily by government. Our systems are controlled, like we have the marriage of big government and big business, where so many changes in society are driven by the corporate sector. And corporate interests will fund certain projects and will say, okay, we're going to put resources into ensuring this demographic can access a project. And then say to the government, get out of the way, leave it to business. Business is more efficient, or free market is more efficient. So I think like what you're potentially arguing for there is a bigger role for government, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. I think that's important for government to lead these changes and to bring people on board. But we're almost in this sort of hesitate to use the word schizophrenic, but this sort of, like, on the one hand we want freedom.
Denial.
We don't want government to be involved, we want freedom, we want like mutual human-to-human exchange. But to get that point, we need government to be really actively involved in facilitating that change, otherwise we're going to leave it up to the corporate sector. Maybe there's a contradiction there.
But government, by definition, is governing body of the...
Yeah, but it's never served the interests of the majority of people. That's what I would
Why?
What?
Democracy.
Because democracy.
Because of capitalism?
Yeah, partly. Like, I mean, governments...
Profits?
We have this idea of the social contract where once upon a time everyone was sort of these free-ranging individuals, and suddenly they decided to organise collectively, and we selected governments to control the distribution and access to resources. That's all nonsense. Like, governments emerged out of feudalism in a situation where elites in society wanted to control the masses, and so they extract wealth from people to pay for a massive military and a massive police force to control the population. The idea that government exists to represent ordinary people, I think, is a pleasant fiction that was constructed to control. And I think that doesn't mean the idea of government or centralised collective action is fundamentally flawed, but I think we should, I think it would be naive of us to say, government is this big benevolent entity that exists for the public good. Actually, it is a coercive and oppressive institution. I say this as someone who's really on board with like communism and like big role for government, but we're a long way from that at the moment.
I grew up in communism and socialism, and capitalism is killing everything. So perhaps we should look into some socialistic points of view. you and what distribution and perhaps blockchain would help us with.
Hopefully.
So, Jonathan, given the fact you are a councillor with Brisbane City Council, how do you, after today, when you go back to work and you're sitting amongst your peers in chamber, how are you going to have the conversation? How are you going to start the conversation with the elected members on this technology and take this further, rather than, because you are in the middle of, you do have the ability to have that courage of voice as an elected member and being accessing this type of information and knowledge. So I guess that's my question. Brisbane City Council has a $2.3 billion budget. It's one of the biggest councils in Australia. It used to be, well, Auckland now has that claim because they've amalgamated on the basis of Brisbane's model. But so what's your call to action after today, after we finish? Because Marcus and I have a lot of work to do in our respective fields, and driving it from an academic perspective, me from an industry perspective. So from a government perspective and a political perspective, what's your next steps when you get back to council?
Good question. I think first, because I've, with the community voting stuff, I've taken that round to other councils and say, look, this was great, we got great solutions, we gave everyone a vote, you guys should try it too, I've got the software, it was designed by a volunteer, you can have it for free, please try and implement this. And they're all just like, no. We don't want to give people more control. We don't want to decentralize our existing power. So the idea that we can just say, hey, politicians, political establishment, here's a great idea as to how you guys can have less power and greater transparency and greater accountability. It's a great idea, why don't you adopt it? Of course they're not going to adopt it. It would be naive to say, oh, we just have to keep showing them the idea and say it's a great idea and I'll just magically take it up. They don't want to devolve power to ordinary people. So that's good. This is a local council from the Tablelands. Maybe weigh in after me, because I think this is an interesting conversation. But what I've found is that the people who benefit most from the current system don't want it to change. There's a second tier of really well-meaning politicians who don't believe change is possible. And for those ones, the thing to do is show them. And so I guess to answer your question, what I do is, okay, spend more time on liquid democracy, spend more time setting up online voting systems, and then I can point to a practical example and say to other councillors, oh, this works, this is a great idea. But if I just stand up in council and say, oh, here's what you guys should consider doing, they're just going to say, no, it's impossible, it's not how we want to do things. Can we? Is that, yeah, sorry. Wait.
Look, it makes me quite cross, some of the comments before were all politicians are corrupt, all developers are corrupt, and I know I'm sitting in the middle of West End,
Bitcoin Cash is not corrupt.
I'm really fairly new to Brisbane, so I actually don't understand the nuances probably in this room, but I think to say all academics are so worried about producing papers that have no link to reality, to say all technology people are just interested in the next IPO and don't give a shit about community. I think, no, that's what I'm saying. To say all politicians, all people in a position of power and influence are not going to be interested in making good community change.
Only the ones in the article will clarify.
Yeah, so I just think that I think that there are some really good opportunities around better engagement. But to go to one of your earlier points is, we're sitting in a little bubble here, and we are in one of the best democracies in the world. I grew up in a country where law and order was very much how much money you had in the back of your pocket, basically. And so we actually, I think we take that for granted, and we take a lot of what we have in this country for granted. We actually have a really good system of governance and government in terms of world standards, but public trust is declining. Public trust is declining, and that is for a very good reason. And that is the question that we have to not just as citizens but as politicians think about a little bit more. So I think the broader, and I also have some issues around I love the idea of bringing technology to improve civic engagement and enable more people to have a say. But I've sat at a barbecue around 50 people in a community that had no idea that there was a de-amalgamation election being called that night. And so to think that the single mum living in 14 Cordelia Street that I had a chat to last week actually knows what parks are in her ward and is going to vote on making a decision. And so we talk about blockchain and people being able to contribute but not doing it anonymously. How do you not know that those are all the rich billionaires that you've pretty much kicked in the ass in the last 2 hours, actually the ones voting on that new park because that's going to serve their kids? So I think there's a role for government in thinking about public value more broadly, and for elected people, that there is a responsibility for them to do that. But have they done that wrong? I mean, we've seen it in Queensland, in the media in the last few months, there's been some pretty shoddy, from a local government perspective, absolutely disgraceful behaviour. Do not absolutely condone it, but that doesn't mean that all people in local government. So find the good people, support them, help them. If you're doing some really cool shit in your community, there's more people that should be supporting people like you to do that. Fighting against the system that we have is not the answer. It's kind of a bit of all of that. We've all got to contribute to our democracy and our society.
There was a lot in that, but the one thing I really want, there's two things I want to emphasise. One is that if we have a broken democratic system and we have people who are disengaged and not well adapted to be able to make good decisions, etc., the answer is not less democracy but more democracy. If people are switched off and they don't give a crap, our response should not be to say, okay, you guys don't give a crap, therefore we're not going to listen to you anymore. The answer should be say, we're going to give you more responsibility and the education and the tools to be able to make good decisions. And so it's not just here, everyone suddenly have a vote on this thing. It's here, have a vote, here's the information, here's the time to make good decisions. But the other thing I just wanted to drill down to, though, is that our society, yes, it's better than some, but it is still massively messed up, big time. And sure, we as citizens might all have votes, but our entire economic system is predicated on the exploitation and the degradation of people, both migrant workers who come to Australia, who work their asses off, pay big taxes and aren't entitled to vote, who have to pay through the nose just to get a visa, who have to pay through the nose to be able to bring their elderly family together. Our economic and government systems are also predicated on the exploitation of millions of people in so-called developing countries. And our standard of living is entirely conditional on the rape and pillage of the natural environment and on the exploitation of those people in other countries. So to hold Australia up and say, oh, we're doing well, guys, we've got a great democracy. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I think we really need to stop patting ourselves on the back when we are one of the worst global citizens. We systematically abuse people's human rights. We stole an entire continent from First Nations peoples, and we still treat them like shit. We are, on a per capita basis, one of the worst contributors to climate change. I could go on and on, but I really react against this idea that we're a good democracy, guys. Everyone should follow our example. We're not. We are a bad global citizen, and that's not a negative reflection on all of us as individuals. It's not saying, oh, you guys should all be ashamed to be Australian. But it is saying we need to reflect critically and understand that the stability and the stable government we enjoy currently is contingent upon the way we interact with our near neighbours and the exploitation of ecosystems and natural resources around the world. We can't divorce those two things. That's really, really important.
I was in Melbourne recently as part of a conference that was organised by the Consumer Policy Research Centre, so we're talking about data ethics and privacy and so forth. Now, Roy Morgan, the guys that are running opinions and looking into the way that we think, they sponsored the after-conference drinks, and it turned into a bit of a focus group. So they are proposing this thing and it has some relevance to blockchain. They're proposing this thing called a social impact rating. And they already have a whole bunch of data around, for instance, whether we trust or whether we distrust the ABC, the federal government, Woolies and Coles. And a lot of that data has been published recently and has some very surprising elements. Like, for instance, we don't trust Coles and Woolies, but we do trust Aldi, according to their methodology and their data. And they've been trying to kind of understand why is it that Aldi as a brand is, set in such high esteem, whereas Coles and Woolies are at the bottom of the list. Anyway, what actually turned out in that conversation, this is kind of what I'm really worried about, is that if we do find more sophisticated ways to produce insights and we produce accountability and transparency, it requires a reaction. And if that reaction is lacking, we in a way have set in motion this train that has all these wonderful possibilities, but it doesn't produce any change. Like what I'm really worried about, and that's why I stole the microphone earlier and said I'm a vegetarian. I'm doing this Leaf Ledger project because I'm concerned about animal welfare, and I'm concerned about life experts, and I'm concerned about the consumption patterns and the impact it has on the reef as well as on climate change, and the list goes on. So if you do find no mechanisms and you design, for instance, with regards to this element of food provenance and the ability for consumers to make informed choices, and they don't give a fuck, then what are you going to do, right? So if you can't afford the Wagyu beef that has been raised with all the kinds of principles adhered to, and it won't have an impact on the Great Barrier Reef, but your salary only allows you to get the lab meat that has been grown in a petri dish out of lab protein, or whatever it might be, or even meat that has been treated in very poor conditions, then we are still at that end of a conundrum around the availability of very interesting insights into our current human condition, but we are just kind of looking and saying, well, what can I do about it? And so that's my greatest fear with this blockchain project, that we're investing into quite a revolutionary piece of technology, but it in itself is not going to be the revolution. So don't mistake your shopping choices for the revolution.
I just want to quickly make one comment in relation to distribution of wealth on public chains. So you did make a comment about that, and I think it's really important because in the future so many more applications are going to be built out on these protocols that are to do with value ascription. So many chains are already centralized in terms of value generation. They're going to 10 wallets, so you've got like 10 wallets that own 25 to 30% of the network already. I think this is actually a critical flaw in the implementations of these protocols, and we're going to see actually development of alternatives in the future because everyone's going to want a piece of it.